Heavenly Father, I just thank you for the time I've been able to spend here, Lord, and time to reconnect. And as well, Lord, is for these podcasts, we just trust it to you. That'll be whatever you make it, Lord. But we do ask that we can just challenge the church, Lord, that we can challenge the leaders and church members to the deep calling of serving you, Lord. And we do understand that in the midst of different cultures, and even here for our nation, Lord, there's numerous things taking place that I think a discussion and just some eye-opening could really edify leaders in guiding their church and just being aware of maybe some pitfalls that can come along the way. So guide this conversation, we pray, in the name of Jesus Christ. Well, I'm here with a friend of mine, Jeremiah. We've known each other for quite some time, and we want to just delve into a conversation regarding technology, artificial intelligence, and what effect this is beginning to have on ministries, churches, how they're promoting themselves, how they're presenting themselves, but even more so delving into this next generation coming up and what their perspective is on this. So, Jeremiah, share just a little bit about yourself so people can get an idea of who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for having me on today. It's just an honor, and we've known each other for, more than 10 years now, I think, and met doing ministry when we were in a very different place, and now I've been in full-time ministry for quite some time, and I'm the worship leader here at Crossroads Church in Seguin, Texas, and I have a beautiful family, and I love what we get to do and just being a part of people's lives and jumping into the mess that is people's lives and then learning to love them and help them through it in very practical, real ways, giving them the gospel in that way, and it's been a joy. So I love what I do. I do get to do music for a living, which is absolutely incredible, and I don't have to travel all the time. I get to be in one place and get to create and get to lead a team of incredible people who I get to do life with and lead them into maturity and just help them with all these very practical things. So I really love where I'm at as far as that goes. Obviously, plenty of challenges in my life right now as well, but I'm really just learning. I think it was about a year ago, God asked me to embrace the mess. Rather than to avoid it or see it as the problem, it realized that the mess is the opportunity for Christ to show himself, to reveal himself in our lives, and not only in my own life, but in my kids' lives and my wife's life and the people that I lead, to not embrace the mess as like that it's good, but that it's an opportunity for us to grow. And so to jump right in the middle of the mess is where Christ wants to be. He wants to show up in his people in the middle of the mess. Thank God he loves us too much to leave us there, because he'll meet us where we're at and he'll bring us to a different place. And so I'm grateful for that.
Ministry is very different in a city. I look at a lot of the ministry you do, and you're connected with a lot of tech in a way that I'm not. These podcasts we do are pretty primitive. We don't do video for various reasons.
Yep.
But it's a medium that the Lord is using, I think, to edify and encourage a lot in the churches. One of the things you and I have kind of been discussing is artificial intelligence. Share a bit about what this is and how churches are beginning to use this.
So, AI is obviously a huge hot topic right now. And I remember not too long ago, I was on a trip with some dear friends of mine, and they would have the morning news on about the stock market. And like the whole conversation was about AI and how AI was affecting the stock market and this stuff. And I never watched the news, so I was just kind of like, wow, they're talking a lot about this. And here comes ChatGPT, and here comes all these things, and now you can, in so many words describe an image that you want it to create or whatever. And so in the creative world, and especially in the church world, like this is becoming, it's just like anything else, where it's a tool that can be either used for good or be used for evil. And I think it's already being used for both. And it's just like a shovel or a car or a gun or anything else. It's not the tool's fault that it gets used for evil. It's what we choose to do with it. And I think AI is incredibly powerful for good and for evil. And so just being aware of that is a huge thing. But in the church world, it's become a tool to help. For instance, if you need a graphic for an event you're doing or whatever, you can create that real quick. If you need to help with lyrics on a song or maybe a point on a message, a lot of pastors are using it for that and things like that, just to kind of help you as kind of a sidekick to a creative process, especially to help somebody get over writer's block or something like that, So it's been helpful in even funny ways. Like a couple weeks ago, I had some of my team just for fun, like we asked ChatGPT to roast us. And it was just kind of making fun of us in a funny way based on the things that we've asked it in the past, And it's funny how kind of eye-opening it is, like how much it doesn't know, but it kind of, based on the information it's given, it gathers and creates something, and it's kind of crazy. But yeah, it's definitely changing the whole landscape of the creative process of everything. But in my line of work, basically all we do is create. And I think that's what we're made to do as mankind. Like, we're created in God's image. There's multiple layers to that, but one of the layers is that we're the only beings on earth that are truly creative. Like, we can create things out of bare bone. Like, God didn't give us houses, he gave us wood, and he knew that we would take that wood and make houses with it. Like, that's amazing to me, that God created us in his image, and he's creative. Like, he created this stuff. He created music. And like, you can see it all over music, like all his favorite numbers, like 7 notes in a scale, 12 notes between one octave and another. Like, all his favorite numbers are just embedded in there. And I love it. Like, triad is the 3. God is all over music. He created, but he didn't create songs for us necessarily. He created the building blocks for songs and then gave us the go-ahead to go then create. And so there's something so powerful about being a creative. And I love that. And so I think there needs to be a conversation about what that looks like, because as creative beings, we're called to create, whether it be creating music or art or community or technology or houses, or like, we're called to create. This is part of who we are as people. And so if we're handing that off to technology, I don't, there's definitely some conversation that needs to happen. They're obviously using it as a tool to help us is one thing, but yeah, you see where we're going with this, I guess.
Well, and here's one of the trends that I think is important, particularly for pastors and church leaders, or anybody in ministry for that matter, missionaries, right? Oftentimes we're working with small groups, if not no groups.
Right.
Many missionaries, we're on the streets evangelizing. We're
Right.
gifting wise, we're kind of tackling and taking on a little bit of everything. And so, yeah, there can be some temptation to, well, let's plug this into AI and get a result.
Yep.
But certainly I would imagine those who know Jesus Christ were facing a stricter judgment as teachers. Certainly be astute to understand that AI in itself is limited.
Yes.
Because it can cast away truth. It can discard truth. You had mentioned one of the things you're beginning to see with this next generation coming up is they recognize really quick what is fake in the sense of artificial intelligence. And they're beginning to long for truth, just basic, fundamental, real.
Yeah.
Speak into that a little bit for us.
There's so much to unpack there, but I'm involved in youth ministry here as well, and I love seeing just the perspective that younger people have. And I think it's such a lie that is created sometimes by the church, by the old people that are stuck in their ways or whatever, and then these young people, they just don't know anything, And I think that's something that the enemy loves, because if we're complaining about the other generation, whether it be young people complaining about old people, which they need the wisdom of old people, or old people complaining about younger people, which older people need the energy and the enthusiasm that young people have, like, we're supposed to need each other. We're supposed to be living in community with people that are vastly different ages than we are, because we need each other so bad. And so some of that complaining I see is so unfounded, and I really have a huge hope for this next generation. I think that they're starting to ask questions that nobody else has been asking for a long time. They're starting to long for things. They're starting to see through the fakeness of it all, and I think for a while us millennials kind of got caught up in the social media trends and the coolness of how everything seemed, and could kind of build this image of yourself on social media out into the world. And we knew it was fake. We knew that we were only putting out the best. Like, I'm not putting out my worst days on social media. I'm putting out my highlight reel. Well, and so is everyone else. So we're not seeing anyone's real life at all on social media. We're seeing everyone else's highlight reel, and then I'm comparing my worst day to their highlight reel and going, why is my life not like that? It beats us down after a while, right? And I think we kind of knew that it was all fake deep down, but we kind of ignored it. And I think that the young generation now coming up, is what I'm seeing, is they don't even question that it's fake. They know that it's all fake. All the airbrushed Instagram models, all the highlight reels, all the the hype that people are creating on social media, like they know it's fake, and they may still enjoy it or watch it or whatever, but it's almost just like that's just entertainment value. That's not real at all. And we saw a bunch of people buying into some of the lies, even during election periods and stuff, of things that are happening. And like a lot of these videos are coming out, they were fake. They were AI made videos or images of things happening. And it's like, we're becoming confused. Like my generation, we're kind of like, whoa, what are we doing? You know, how do you know what's fake and what's real? And the students nowadays are like, no, dude, it's all fake. It's all fake. Nothing's real.
This is a bit of the separation I
Yeah.
see between the generations, because my generation, in some ways, we've gotten lazy.
Yeah.
I know pastors who like just buying messages online.
Yeah.
Because it's easy. It's done for them. Oh, I tweak it. I adjust it to fit my congregation. But this is where truth is getting lost. You understand what I'm saying? We're beginning to just purchase a form of Christianity
Right.
that at its core is fake and counterfeit in many ways because it's getting marketed. And this is kind of what I think is good to maybe begin to draw separation and recognizing. For example, I know many churches, they run the social media, they run the online presence, the videos, the teachings, fellowship, right? People can sit at home and just log on. And this is what, during COVID, I think was really a catapult that brought this forward, where I heard many different believers of different congregations, say, oh, I just love it. I can stay home in my pajamas. But what's lost? The fellowship of the body of Christ.
Right.
When you think of the new command that Christ gave his disciples at the Last Supper, and he says to them, he says, I give to you this new command, that you love one another as I have loved you, right? This is a love that's sacrificial. In this younger generation, this is what I see them longing for.
Yes.
Many who are in Christ at a very young age, they're fervent in a way I've never seen in my generation.
100%. Yeah.
And yet there are still those who are going wayward, don't get me wrong. But for those, I'm seeing at a very young age, a stark difference in the maturity, if I could use that word, or even a quality of a believer. They're recognizing things, I would say my generation hasn't yet.
Right.
And my generation are the church leaders and the pastors.
That's the scary part. Yeah.
And so we're running towards ways to make our life easier in ministry.
Right.
And yet for this next generation coming up, they recognize it as fake.
Right.
Speak in on that a little
Yeah.
bit.
And I've been kind of curious about this, because as AI has gotten really big, especially, I mean, now you can sing a song into your phone and it'll spit out an entire production of that. You can write on so many words what you want a video to be, and it will come up with that video with your face or someone else's face that you know. And so you can literally create anything. And what that's caused, I think, is the diminishing value of that kind of thing. And again, that's a tool, like you were talking about live streaming or social media, whatever. And it's like, again, those are tools. And if a church is to be effective in what we're trying to do, which is nothing more than the Great Commission, the Great Commandment, what are those things doing for us? And if we can't answer that question, then we shouldn't be doing them. I think a lot of churches think that they need to have a live stream just because, oh, that's what churches do now. Ever since COVID, like, oh, we just need to have a live stream. Let's just throw it up online. It's like, no. Why are we doing a live stream? If a live stream is a specific purpose of an outreach, then a lost person is going to see that and watch it to know that our church isn't crazy snake wrangling church, before they come and bring their friends. And it's a specific outreach tool for the lost. That's a very different thing. Like, that can be highly effective, but then we need to do it very well. And it's like we were talking about this yesterday, like the art is made by God. And why do we think as a church that we can be some second rate? The best art has always been made by the church. The best art in history has always been made by look at the sculptures, the paintings. So we have the best story to tell. Why wouldn't we make the very best art and music and video and all that in the world? And so if we're going to be live streaming or using social media or any of these tools or even AI, like, what's it for? What's the purpose? And if we can answer that, which for our church, I definitely believe it's an outreach tool for the lost to look at. It's not for Susie who couldn't make it because she worked too late the night before and needs to stay in her pajamas. Like, there's no excuse for that. That's a believer that should be in community with other believers. This is a tool for lost people to then come and hear the gospel, right? And so if that's a tool that needs to be used, and if that's not feasible, or if we're not doing it for that reason, then we should absolutely cank it and use those resources elsewhere, because it's not worth it. But as far as AI goes, the younger generation is noticing so much quicker what's real and what's fake, because they have this like sixth sense of what's real. They notice when something is made up, and they notice when something is real. And I think that's something that our generation, we're just starting to catch on to, because like you said, we're kind of behind the 8 ball when it comes to technology, and they've always known that this stuff is fake. So I think we have to be very careful. What happens when you have something come so easily, like video or music or highly produced things that used to take months and thousands of dollars to create a well-recorded song, and now you can sing it in your phone and AI will spit it out like that. Well, what it does, it diminishes the value of that thing, right? Because now anyone can do that. And so kids these days, if I can use that term, they don't value that. They will not value that anymore. Looking 10 years forward, there's going to be almost no value to any of that, because this AI stuff is going to get just better and better and better. And so they're not going to believe any of it. And as a church, I think not that we don't ever use these tools. What I'm saying is that we kind of need to run the other way toward authenticity, because these kids in 10 years, the only thing that's going to have any value at all is going to be somebody in a room next to you singing a song or talking to you face to face. Like, that's the only thing that they're going to know is real. And so why don't we start running that direction right now? Because that's where it's going. Everything else is going to lose its value. And it's just like anything else in the world. Like, we've seen so many things that the world has tried to do, and it just implodes on itself. And it goes back, I'm actually excited about this, because it goes back to how it was originally supposed to be. You're going to see all this stuff implode on itself. Like, you see the feminist movement and the LGBTQ movement. Like, if a man can suddenly be a woman, then should they be a feminist? And like that's going to implode on itself and eventually go back to how it was supposed to be, right? And this whole thing with AI and with creating and stuff, like, it's all going to be so fake, that eventually it's going to lose all its value, and it's already doing that very quickly. And then the only thing that's going to have any value at all is me sitting next to you or standing next to you in a room, talking to you, singing for you, singing with you, enjoying community. Like, that's the only thing that's going to be real, which that's the only thing that's ever been real. But we kind of, for a while, entertain the idea that maybe it could be real.
It's one of the biggest things I've noticed culturally.
Yeah.
When my family and I moved back to Western Wisconsin and began Hispanic outreach, the Spanish services, it's where a lot of the U.S. culture really kind of rubbed you the wrong way. Mm-hmm. A lot of associations, organizations, they're heavily driven by business model. They're heavily driven by profiling. They'll do all kinds of profiles and questions and tests on you to see your personality and are you going to fit on this team and all these things. And maybe in the grand scheme there were some best intentions regarding it, but what's always kind of unsettled my spirit is you're essentially removing the spirit. Social media, right? During a lot of the riots in 2020 and into 2021, one of the biggest things you saw is pastors and leaders would go to social media to try to get an understanding what's happening. Mm-hmm. And in the area where we live, it's like, well, why don't you just go right down to the cities? It's 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
I remember after Precinct 3 fell, I went down there to do some evangelizing and praying for the households and stuff surrounding this police department that was abandoned and fell. Mm. It's interesting during that day because, and this gets into the fake, right? The fake productions. Numerous news media, I remember they'd come in and you still had mass protests taking place, but CNN came in. They had 4 or 5 black guys with them. They had their news camera. Mm-hmm. And you have the police line, National Guard, and then just different police that are trying to protect this building. And it was such a charade. You literally watch this news crew walk up. The black people start screaming in the face of the police. They film it. They're gone in 5 minutes. And then the evening news is about the riots in Minneapolis, and they show that footage. I saw the same down on the border. We were at a Children's Day parade at a common celebration done, And Planned Parenthood came in. They had their signs saying, keep families together. The Border Patrol was in the parade. And so it was a pre-planned presentation of a protest. Now, the reality is it wasn't even a protest. You had one man with these signs. He handed them to various Hispanics. Many of them didn't speak English. They don't know even what the signs were. A lot of them used it for cover, to keep the sun off them. Well, as soon as the Border Patrol came by in the parade, they showed them how to, hold up the sign.
Yeah.
The news media filmed that one spot. Nobody was protesting. Nobody came to protest. They're enjoying the day at this parade. Guess what the night story was on the news, right? And
Yep.
these things have
Yep.
gone on for a long
It's a
time.
production, yeah.
But again, getting into this younger generation, I think there's a keenness to this that my generation isn't.
Oh, 100%.
Because even as a lot of the riots were taking place with George Floyd, what was interesting to me is on Facebook and social media, one of the biggest slogans that was going around was "Weep with those who weep." And if you click like, you're weeping with those who weep. And one of the things that always unsettled me is like, you're not with them. You're not with them.
No.
And it's the same now with the same protests. It's the same show, same charade in Minneapolis now, where they're creating a fake crisis of sorts. And there's so much to these things. The value, the authentic nature of a Christian. The Christian is one who goes into these areas.
Right.
They meet with the people. They pray with the people. They speak with the people. It's the same with our ministry in Western Wisconsin. There's a lot of hard things, but we're with the people.
Right.
And what social media doesn't have is it doesn't have prayer. It doesn't have the relationship of being with one another.
Yep.
Worship. There's nothing more beautiful than just opening and taking out the guitar and having the room filled with
Right.
song.
Yeah.
Even though singing off key, it has a beauty to it. And I believe God is more exalted in these things. I would encourage, and again, I get it, it's handy having AI to maybe produce a poster
Yeah.
and things like this.
Right.
I do believe in many ways my generation hasn't yet figured out the value of being with the people.
Yeah.
And enjoying the fellowship by the Spirit in Jesus Christ.
It's so true. And sometimes I wonder, like, we as people are not made to handle the weight of all the bad that's going on in the whole world. We're created to be in community, and like, how many people can I be truly in community with at one time? It's not that many. If my entire life is spent worried about some issue in another state or another country that I don't even, like you said, I can't go there and see it right now. And that's why I've been largely quiet on social media or any other outlet about what's going on, like in Minneapolis right now, because I don't know it. And I don't believe anything I'm seeing from either side. I don't believe any of it because it's all a show. The world's a stage right now. I want to talk to somebody who's boots on the ground and actually seeing what's going on. And you've given me a lot of insight into that because you are in that area and you've seen a lot of the cartel movement and what's going on. And it's frankly pretty scary, pretty crazy what's going on. And I'm not going to believe anybody that hasn't been in it and boots on the ground. So you're the only one that I've actually talked to that's seen it firsthand. And like, I'm inclined to believe that because that's actually somebody I know. I don't believe anything on social media I see because, like you said, they can film anything. And just outside the shot, there may be something that totally changes your perspective, but they're going to keep that outside the shot on purpose, you know? And like you said, the younger generation, I think, has a lot more keen sense to that. And the beauty of it, again, is that a real community, real people, real lives, real music, like live music, handcrafted things are going to be so much more valuable in the next 10 years, even the next 5 years. The effect of this is going to be so incredible because anybody's going to be able to create anything, but then everybody's going to know that that's fake. And that line is going to become harder and harder to see because AI is going to get better and better at making it look like it's human. So I think it goes back to what are we called to do again as Christ followers. We are called to live in his image, to create like he called us to create. He created us to create. And that's a beautiful thing. And if we're trying to hand that off because it's easier, it's almost like when David said after he had sinned and he was offered this free piece of land And he said, I'm not going to offer something to God that didn't cost me anything. And I think there's something really powerful to that when we think about creatives. Are we going to offer something to God, whether it be a song or a video or a painting or anything that literally didn't cost us anything except for a few types on a ChatGPT thing, and then it came up with something? Like, I'm not saying that we should never use it to create posters or whatever like that, but what if instead of the energy it takes us to create something on chat or with AI, what if we were to use that and create something real, like a hand-painted image of someone that's truly gifted, has something special to it that you cannot put a finger on. And it's just unbelievable. And that's going to become so valuable in the near future, because it already is valuable, but it's going to be recognized. That value is going to be recognized in the near future, because people are going to get sick of the fake. I think they already are. It's just getting multiplied at this point. So,
And fundamentally, what I would encourage too is, particularly with churches, even the production of service in many ways has gotten mundane for a lot of people. It's choreographed from start to finish. And then we say, Lord, bless it. And this is quenching the spirit in many ways. This is, some ways, again, this would be a generational difference I'm noticing, where a lot of the younger generation, I believe, again, they're seeking truth in a way my generation hasn't, or maybe has been slow to.
yep.
And they're seeking real and authentic. And when they encounter that, their curiosity, their questions, even our time here with you the other night, I just enjoyed the people that were coming up asking very fundamental, basic questions.
Yeah.
One lady wanted to sharpen her skill set on evangelizing. And so she was asking me about, well, how do you do it? And how does the Lord use you in these different things? And
Yeah.
this is what glorifies God. A machine, it's going to spit out what it's pre-programmed. But the Christian, well, we're anointed by the power of the Spirit. The very writing of a worship song to exalt and glorify Jesus Christ,
Right.
it's heart, mind, and soul
Yeah.
that gets brought to fruition in this. And so pastors, as tempting as it may be, please do not start down this road of having AI write your messages. Why? Because there's no power in it. It's not the Spirit. It's not being given to you from the Holy Spirit himself. Why? Because your congregation's unique. In your congregation, there's various trials in regards to men and women battling sin and problems in marriages and all these things. And one of the biggest fatal flaws I've seen over all these years is somewhere along the way, those of us that are entrusted to be the teachers and pastors and the leaders, I think we've done a huge disservice to our Lord in trying to always take the easy path.
Yes. And that path may be more professional looking, but that's not, like you said, again, going back to the purpose of these tools, like AI is a tool, just as Photoshop can be a tool, or any of these things that we've created, technology, a vehicle is a tool, all of it. And we can use it to help us create. But what we have to understand is that, like, AI or a computer doesn't have experiences. It doesn't have faith. It doesn't have an actual conscience. It doesn't have a reality of a life lived. And so my pastor here, I love listening to his testimonies, because he's had so many life experiences of just down-to-earth real times when he was either totally without an answer of what to do, and God just made something happen out of thin air that he had no idea, no expectation of. And he's seen it so many times that his faith is now at a point where he's able to just look at the next mountain in front of him and go, I don't know how this is going to get fixed, but God's going to do it. And I love that. I'll sit in the car with him, and we're driving to lunch or whatever, and he'll just tell me story after story after story of the things God's done. In the last couple of days, I've been talking to you, and you've told me story after story after story of the things God's done. Why is your faith where it's at? Because you've lived all those stories. That's why your faith is where it's at. You wonder yourself, how did this person get here in their faith? The only way they got there is by facing a million impossible situations and watching God work through those situations. AI does not have that experience. It does not know the power of God. It doesn't see the power of God. It doesn't experience any of that. But it can have a false sense of that, because it basically is just a culmination of all the information that's on the internet, is all that is. So it's exactly as good as what we put into it, right? So AI is literally just a tool to, at best, help us get over writer's block in a way, flesh out an idea or whatever, but it can never live or experience God's goodness. And that is what you're saying. That is the power in what we're doing. That is the power of God, is for someone to see someone else who's lived a life and experience God's goodness and his grace. And it says that even the angels long to look into that. Like, we have this thing that's so precious, and yet we squander it sometimes because we don't feel like it's maybe professional enough or good enough. And God never asked us to make it like that. He asked us to make something real. And so I struggle with this line all the time, because there's this idea, if you flip it too far on the other side, that somehow unpreparedness is better. I've heard so many people maybe on the other side so far that are like, well, why do you have a set list for your worship services or whatever? Why do you prepare or, make sure the sound's great? Like, let's just pray all week and then just show up and sing. And it's like, okay, but also God's called us, like, if you're going to give a message, God's called you to take that seriously and go prepare for it, right?
Well,
So
there's a sifting that has to be done.
Absolutely.
Right?
And so we need to think through it, and we need to prepare. And so for me, like, I take joy in that, in spending a lot of time preparing, like, what key is the song ending at? What key does the next song start in? How's that transition going to look like? Why? Because it matters, because this art is something God's given us, and if we're going to be using it for his glory, let's do it the best we can. And so I take great joy in a lot of prep for this stuff. And I think that can get lost if we go so far to the other side where we go, oh, that, no prep is necessary. It's like, no, that's not at all what God's asking. God's asking us to take this seriously because it is something he's given us. So we need to steward it well. So we're not saying don't prepare. We're not saying don't use tools to be the best version of what this art that God's given us, because that is absolutely something that we should do because he's given it to us. Let's steward it well. Let's steward the gifts he's given us well. Let's prepare. Let's get the vocals the best we can. Let's get the drums the best they can. Let's get the mix right. Let's get the room sounding good. Like, all those things matter. The color coding on the camera, the guy that's running the camera, getting the shot right. Like, that stuff matters because of the gospel, because art matters. And if we're going to do that, we need to prepare well. But what we can't do is hand off that calling to something who hasn't experienced God's goodness. That's where that line is drawn in my heart.
You mentioned one thing that I believe is so key to the building one's faith, and you spoke about experience. Mm-hmm. I know you've been doing some work through a music ministry of sorts. Mm-hmm. You shared regarding a particular testimony in Canada. One of the things in regards to truth and lie that's taking place in our world, fundamentally, the persecution of Christians, the persecution of the church. One thing I often hear in the United States from many pastors and church leaders and stuff, and it's a passing comment, I think oftentimes just maybe stated off the cuff, but they say, oh, well, there's no persecution here. Now, there's varying kinds of persecution, and our podcasts, we do focus deeply into this particular thing taking place in the world around us, why it's important that the church recognize the need to be in prayer for our other brothers and sisters. One of the aspects of persecution that takes place is there's political persecution. This is extremely strong right now in Canada. Go ahead and launch off this and share about some of your experience of this persecution that took place on some ministry you were doing in this country.
Yeah, so we were doing some worship events with a big ministry, and we flew all the way to Canada to do it. The whole team flew in, and there was boots on the ground in Canada that were helping get these, and basically the outdoor worship events, giant outdoor worship events where there would be churches from the area, there would be unbelievers, hopefully as many of them as possible. There was plenty of protesters at most of these, that were also hearing the gospel, which is crazy. It was so cool because, these people come to protest us and they get a 2-hour church service. It's awesome. But we were specifically doing these things outside the walls of the church. Not that having a church service in a building that's great, but there's certain people you're not going to ever reach unless you go to where they are. And I think that's kind of been the basis of your whole ministry is instead of just staying in your 4 walls, like, yes, we preach the gospel there too, but let's also go out to where they are and give it to them there, because they're not going to step foot in our church. There's certain people that just won't. And we've got to go out to where they are. And so I was really excited to be a part of this, and I've been a part of it for a while. We did worship events on the steps of every U.S. state capitol leading up to the election, and it was nothing to do with trying to campaign for somebody or anything. It was just praying over that state, praying over the government of each state, and worshiping on the steps of the biggest battleground in every state, which is their state capital, it was so cool to be a part of that. Well, we went to Canada and found out pretty quickly that we were very unwelcome there in a lot of sense. And I saw the persecution firsthand. I think in America, the persecution came out a lot clearer during COVID. You know, we saw pastors getting in big trouble for still holding church services and stuff like that. We didn't see it as much before that, but still to a large degree, I think the persecution is very subtle, and it's more of a social pressure in the U.S. And I figured it would be like that in Canada as well. But when we got there, there was some very real pushback, and I did not expect that at all. None of us really did, but upon landing, the gal that picked us up informed us that they had pulled our permit. The team had spent months working on getting the permits, because these big parks and these big areas that we were doing these worship gatherings in, if you have more than a few hundred people there, you've got to get a permit. And especially if you're running a sound system or a PA, you're running live music, you've got to have a permit for these places. And so obviously we were complying with all that. We were getting the proper channels, getting permits, doing all this stuff, and they had to have plans. Some people had to have electrical contractors come out and make sure that the generator's grounded, like all this stuff. We had to jump through all these hoops and do all these things and pay thousands of dollars for these permits and stuff like that. And that wasn't going to stop this ministry from doing what we did. So we went through all those proper channels, you know, and upon arriving, we're already flying into Montreal and then realizing that they had just pulled the permit, and it was just domino effect from there. Every other place that we had a run of like 5 different places on that run. We were going to hit all through Canada, and all of the permits got pulled on every single place. And not only that, but there was crazy protests, and then the people that ended up opening up their doors to us to do the events, because we weren't about to just back down and just go, oh, well, we can't do it now. So we spent hours in prayer. We were up till like midnight that first night, just praying together in a room, and just watched God open these doors over and over and over again. It was so cool to see. And this guy had a farmer's field, and he's like, you can use that, you know, and then the protesters would show up there and they'd find out where we were, and they'd still be, but it didn't stop us. But yeah, we had a guy come in a church. We ended up in a church in Montreal. This pastor said we could use it for the event, and then police came, and then they started saying, oh, they need a permit to do this. It's a concert, and which it wasn't. It was literally a free worship event. We weren't charging a dime for it. And they started making up all these rules, and then they started pressuring the pastor and telling him that he couldn't hold this event or else he was going to get his occupancy permit pulled, and they couldn't even have church on Sunday. And it was just crazy watching these pastors under this crushing pressure of, what am I supposed to do? Like, I want to hold this free worship event in my church, and they're telling me I can't, and I'm going to get my permit pulled off occupancy. So like, it's going to be illegal for me to hold church services in this place. And it was just crazy to see. And then during that, somebody lit a smoke bomb and threw it at us, you know, on stage, and he was trying to set off the fire alarms so that we had to basically stop the service, and God stopped that from happening. The fire alarms didn't go off, and it was crazy. But yeah, just turned very real very quickly.
Well, and you mentioned to me before with this fire alarm, it was a very sensitive fire alarm.
The pastor told us after this that, he said, you know, the biggest miracle tonight, and we hadn't even thought of this. He said, the biggest miracle tonight was the fact that, he said, I've had birthday parties in this room. And granted, this is an old church in the middle of the city, so it was a giant building with, you know, super tall ceilings and stuff. And he said the fire alarms are so sensitive here that we've had birthday parties in here, and the candles from the birthday cake set off the fire alarm. And here somebody threw a smoke bomb at us, just filled the place with this pink smoke. It smelled awful, and it didn't set off the alarm. So we're like, that is incredible. And also maybe check your alarms now, because they might not be working anymore. But it was an act of God. It was amazing, you know, watching that. And we just continued on for the rest of the night, and God changed lives that night. It was incredible.
This is the heart of ministry. I'd encourage all the body of Christ to really begin to pursue. Yes, it's one thing, you know, we have our Sunday services, we have our Bible studies, we have our different discipleship programs, doctrine classes. One of the things I marvel at is oftentimes in Bible studies, you have such great proclamation of God's truths on so many levels and so many depths and so many experiences of those that have been serving Christ. Yet the streets remain pretty bare with the gospel going out. I think this is something the churches really have to wrestle in a very deep way, in a deep way in prayer. Are you running your services the way perhaps God is intending you to run them, or are you just doing what you always do? And I think oftentimes much of the culture of the United States has established this business model. It's established a form of Christianity that I think for many has just become a production. And yet, hearing of your time in Canada, and yes, you face the enemy coming after the gospel to shut it down, and yet you persevere. Well, what was the fundamental piece that you did? Well, we prayed and we prayed until real late, and then God did what he does.
God did what he does. And yes, and also God works through his people. I've heard this time and time again where people are asking during COVID or during any amount of crazy things that have happened, horrible things that have happened in our country or in the world. And they're asking the question, and rightfully so, they're asking the question, where is God in all this? And the answer has always, always, always been the same. He's in his people. He's in his church. God is working through his people, through his church. And as we prayed, he opened up doors through his people. It was always using the people. Not like God needs us, because he doesn't. He can do his work without us, but he loves to make us a part of it so that we experience his goodness, so that we experience his miracles, and it shapes our faith. It gives us more faith. You'd see David. He faced the giant, and what did he say? He said, in the past, when I was faced with a bear or a lion, God saved me from it. And the only reason he was able to stand in front of the giant is because he had experienced God's working when he was a nobody, out with the sheep, and nobody cared. But he had those experiences to where he knew that God was powerful enough to save him. Unless we let ourselves go through these experiences, and I think a lot of the American church, like what we're trying to do, just like what you said with our calling, we're trying to hand it off to a computer, or we're trying to hand it off to somebody else, or we're trying to make it easier on ourselves. And so much of that is causing us to not experience God's goodness in the middle of it, not experience his miracles, because we're using money or comfort or whatever to shelter ourselves from the tough experiences that caused that growth of faith. David had never been out in the countryside with those sheep. He never would have experienced that stuff. And so I would just encourage all of us as church leaders, as Christians, you're going to see God work when you step into an impossible situation that he's calling you to. Don't just put yourself in hard positions just to do it. But if you're obedient to the call, he will put you in those positions, because he loves to show up when there's no other way. Because then we know it's him. If there's any question in our minds that maybe it was something else, what glory does he get from that? It has to be him and only him. And so I think he loves to show up in those areas. And I've loved to see that. And like you said, God showed up in his church, in his people. And it's always those people that he uses to bring about what he wants to do. And it was so cool to see that. People that I had never met before, just opening their doors, connections, people that said yes, whether it be opening up their piece of land to do a worship event on it. It's so many different things. Or some people it's giving to a ministry. Some people it's like with you, quitting your job, 16, 17 years ago, comfortable job, and going out into the mission field with your family. And that's the scariest thing in the world, but all you have to do is say yes to what he's asking you to do. And that's different for every single person. But if we take that step of yes, we will experience his goodness in ways that we never would if we didn't.
It's the abundant life. It's
Yes.
the abundant life we have in Jesus Christ. Be encouraged, church. Wrestle some of these things that we're seeing in our society and culture. Yeah. Don't take the easy path. Stand for Christ. You shared of these brothers and sisters in Canada that helped enable you fulfill and complete what God had put on your hearts to go do. And I even think for them, they were faithful under a government that will come after them.
And it has, like that pastor got fined, I think $5,000 for holding that event, for saying yes to that. And that's very real persecution. might not look like what we think persecution looked like in the scripture, but I guarantee if we let things keep going this way, it will start to look like people getting thrown. I mean, we're already seeing this. Pastors getting thrown in prison for holding events that they supposedly shouldn't have been holding according to the government. And when saying yes to God is hard, are we going to do it? When saying yes to God is not popular, are we going to do it? And I think in America right now, it's that's where we're in. It's the social pressure of it being not cool, or somehow because you're holding services when you're supposed to be social distancing or whatever, that's not caring supposedly or whatever. But yet there's people dying alone in hospitals because nobody is allowed to go touch them. Is that caring? Because God's called us to those people, and God's called us to, when the lepers came up to Jesus, he touched them. He didn't care. Where's that boldness that we have to really think that if I'm in God's will, I'm untouchable until it's my day to go? And there's such a blessing in that. There's such a freedom in that, because I know that if I'm actively doing what he's called me to do, then he'll protect me. And if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. And like Paul said, to live is Christ, to die is gain. And I'm so grateful for that, because it gives us this fearlessness that I think has long been known of the church as being fearless. We're the ones in the middle of the chaos, in the middle of when everyone else is hiding and scared. We go out, we do the hard things. And the church in America has lost that due to this pansy-like social pressure that, you're not caring for this or that person if you go touch them. No, that's the social pressure talking. That's not Christ talking, because he tells us to go. He tells us to touch the people, the sick, the hurting. He tells us to go out and to love those people. And so I think we need to be careful with that, because it's almost easier to see when the persecution is really bad, when people are directly getting thrown in prison or killed for their faith or whatever. It's easier to draw that line and go, oh no, this is persecution and that's not. But when that persecution looks like somebody getting canceled on social media, or somebody not getting liked by the masses, or a bunch of people saying stuff about you that's not true, that's a very different kind of persecution, but it's a persecution nonetheless. And we have to know that that's what that is. And if we recognize that, I think it can give us the boldness to step into what we're called to do without being afraid of that,
To be faithful.
100%.
One of the things we shared a couple nights ago is oftentimes you'll get these moments where God shows up and it's undeniable, and he's glorified. The servant that experiences a lot of these bigger things, I think it's important we don't overlook the little things. Mm-hmm. Those who are faithful in much have been faithful in little first.
Yeah.
And so for those that may be wrestling what God has for them, what the future may hold, it's just one first step of obedience.
Yeah.
Will take you to that next step of obedience. That will take you to that next step of obedience. Rarely in my experience do we have any idea of the picture of what God's doing in the fullness.
Yeah.
Right? It's like this great tapestry where God's forming a great picture, a great piece of artwork. And if we come too early and look at it, we say, oh, well, that's a very ugly person. Well, that's a very ugly scenery.
Right.
Well, he hasn't finished it. And pursuing Christ is very similar, where I know in modern day obedience kind of gets mocked far too much. I cringe sometimes at some of the teachings I hear regarding grace, because grace is often presented as being forgiven, but rarely taught on the other half of it. As much as we're forgiven, we're also enabled, and we're also trained in the righteousness and holiness of our God. And grace is the very thing that enables us to do what God has simply commanded and said. And it's a joy, it's a peace, it's an incredible thing to be a part of. I know many in the churches all over, so many areas we speak and share and preach. I see hungry sheep just wanting to learn what it is to follow in faithfulness and follow in obedience. And God is bringing this forth.